in the past month or, well, in the past year, we've been involved with School 16 initially because they had closed it and then we're going to ship the kids across town, and we didn't agree with all the reasons they picked to close it. It was maybe exaggerated a bit. Anyways, we succeeded in getting the board, thanks to Mary helping out, to agree to bring it back and renovate the school. So it's got about $10 million earmarked for renovation, and it'll be 2015, I think, before it reopens, unless we can move something up.
I think it's going to be later than that.
You think it's going to be later than that?
Unless there's some pressure and, I don't know, unless there's a change in course, but I've advocated for it to be as early as possible.
Mm-hmm. So you think it's going to be later?
So I was expressing concern that if 44's closure deadline is moved up very soon, that 44 would close and 16 would not yet be back in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be having a continuation of the situation right now where it's difficult for new families to place a child into a 19th ward school right now.
Mhm.
If you're not willing to bus your child to South Street, and if you're concerned about the potential instability of 44 closing imminently, then it's a problem. And so it would make that problem even worse if we were to close 44 prior to School 16 being back
Mm-hmm.
on Post Avenue. So in the course of expressing those concerns, when I heard that 44 was going to close imminently or sooner than, several years from now, that brought an answer to specific questions regarding 16, that it would have to be done as part of Phase 2 FMP. And Phase 2 FMP legislation has not yet been passed. So, even if it gets legislated soon, within the next several months, this year, the planning and the rolling out of that wouldn't be until Phase 1 is finished.
They don't even have enough money to do the planning during 2014?
I was also addressing the fact that School 16 had been slated for SIP money, capital improvement, ongoing capital improvement money. For this past summer, it was supposed to have been spent. So the planning had been done for that a couple years ago. It was supposed to have been spent this last summer, and that was waylaid because of the emergency closure and evacuation of the building and so on. So, right, so I'm trying to make the case that there was nothing really that the board authorized or that was a definite radical change in course regarding the 16 building. We never approved a permanent closure of that building, so to permanently take that off of the SIP track is really problematic. So I was making the case for restoring SIP money to 16 for initial improvements and or planning.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's been a lot of planning done, though, in a lot of contexts. So, it seems like there should be pieces of planning that skilled engineers and architects and planners could put together without going to the drawing board in terms of planning for 16. That's just my unprofessional, in terms of not having any engineering or architecture background. It just seems to me that should be the case. So that's where the answer from the administration lies, and as far as I can tell, I'm the only one from the board who's really expressing concern about the distant future renovation to School 16 and return home.
How distant are we talking?
Well, like I said, Phase 2, they're saying that all of the work would be done in the context of Phase 2 of the facilities modernization plan. Phase 2 hasn't been legislated yet. Phase 1 is just really getting rolling. So I think we're talking years,
If not 215, what are we talking, 216, 217?
You'd have to ask those questions, but I think 215 is not feasible for it to have been started and finished, given that we don't even have the legislation yet.
Yeah, what's SMP?
FMP, Facilities Modernization Plan.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we'd better keep talking to superintendent, see what the latest is. And as far as School 10, which people is still there, but nothing's been, I haven't heard anything in terms of how many dollars they think it's going to take to renovate that and when that would be. That falls into the same bailiwick as 16.
Except that there is current SIP money that's been allocated
Mhm.
for 10, so there's some SIP money available.
Now, yeah.
Facilities modernization.
No, CIP is capital improvement,
Oh,
so
okay,
it's,
thanks.
it's like the ongoing money that's used to renovate schools from year to year. And each year, there are a number of schools that are
I got you.
in that
Yeah,
bowl of being worked on.
thank you.
Now, the biggest problem they had at 16 was the heat in some of the classrooms, especially the upstairs classrooms. Has anything been kicked around of at least starting back with preschool and kindergarten and early grades and building it back up?
They're not talking in that level of detail. They're saying it's,
Far off.
yep.
Okay.
But, I mean, that's not to say that others besides me shouldn't be continuing to
Mm-hmm.
ask those questions and make the case.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the urgency, because I know of a couple of specific cases of students entering kindergarten who are in the pre-K program going to charter schools because there's no neighborhood school.
When
You know,
is-
they want to send their kids to 16 and it's not available. So-
When's the next meeting that we should be aware of to,
I mean, there's monthly board meetings, it's the same answer as always. There's monthly
Mhm.
board meetings, there's, you know, contacting the superintendent directly,
Mhm.
contacting board members directly.
okay. All righty, so we won't count our,
Can't turn your back.
Can
for a
you
minute.
turn your back for a minute there? Slip it forward.
That goes around.
Yeah, and tomorrow just walked in, and your name, sir?
Bruce Dunn.
Bruce Dunn.
Yes.
Delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
You'll be able to add your name to the list, because
Okay.
Dan should be on there, but... Well, we might as well get started with the presentation. Then Robin Dettman is going to do about his work with School 33. He was a facilitator in helping turn that school around, getting the principal and the teachers to reorganize things. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, I won't do it in the chronological order that I gained the information as I began to work with 33 School, but because the purpose that the superintendent, Manny Rivera, had in terms of bringing me over there I didn't discover it till later in the process, but basically the State Board of Regents Field Service Team had told Manny that they were shutting the school down, they were decertifying it, was no longer gonna, because the performance was so bad and the environment was so poor over there that they just said, this is it, this is the last year. And it was 1995, and I'd been active in the district on many levels, and my two children went to school in the city school district, and I got involved with the schools they were attending, and then I got involved with things on a district level, and got involved with parent organizations, got involved with some of the committees that the Blue Ribbon Task Force. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that's where the Center for Governmental Research pulled together some brain power in the community, and they invited me to be on that committee. I was involved with the Center for Governmental Research when they were here during the early 1990s until about the mid 1996, 97, 98. I think they were gone by that time. But they'd come up from Washington and located up here for that period of time, thinking that a lot of good things were going on in Rochester. They wanted to be part of it. They wanted to contribute. So that was going on at that time, and I had felt that there was an answer to the question that everybody continues to have: why can't we turn these schools around? Why can't we help create an environment where the children can learn, or at least be more successful than they had been? So I challenged Manny. I said, let me work with the worst school in the district. I don't want to go to a school that's doing okay. I said, give me an opportunity to work with a school that is just, you consider to be the worst performing school, the worst environment, whatever. So in the middle of May that year, he called me and said, okay, you made a believer out of me. Here's a school, 33 school, here's the principal's name. He knows you're gonna come over there. And so I went over and introduced myself and started the process. And what I do in my work is, first thing I do when I'm working in a new project is to just observe and ask questions. So that's what I did. I went around the school, and the first thing I did is I went in the main office to let them know I was there, that I was there to meet the principal. And there were chairs lined up all along the wall, all the way from the entrance all the way to the principal's door, with students sitting in there. So I asked secretaries, what's going on with the students? Oh, they're discipline issues. They're here to see the principal. And there were other administrators in the school. He wasn't the only administrator, so that was kind of curious that was going on. And then eventually he took me around the school, and I looked at the inside of the school. I'd already walked around the outside of the school, looked at the graffiti, broken windows, and things like that. So I got a sense of the environment. I didn't know at that time that the Board of Regents had told them they were going to shut it down. He didn't tell me that. But it didn't matter to me. It was what it was, and I was going to work with the people that were there. And so then I met with the school-based planning team to assess their school improvement plan, where they were in the process. And it was still fairly early in that process of schools developing their school improvement plan. So, although I think it's still this way today, that there's schools that don't understand what a school improvement plan really is designed to do and how to create that plan. So, but back then it was something that was pretty common, that the schools had no idea of how to put it together, and they were just trying to learn how to work together as parents and teachers and administrators, sitting at the same table and learning to have the same agenda. So that's the reason I was also working with 44 schools shortly after that, just on their school-based school improvement plan, because they were dead in the water. They were not going anywhere. But anyway, so back to 33 schools. So that's the environment that I came into. They had an outline of a school improvement plan, but they were afraid to present it to the staff and to the parents, and there were community people involved as well. They thought the morale was so bad in the school, they thought that whatever they put out there, they were going to get lynched. So they'd stopped basically where they were. So my recommendation was to put that out as a straw proposal to the faculty and the parents, and by the entire community of the school. They had the school improvement plan broken down by areas, so they could decide which area they felt they had the best expertise and so forth. And principal called a meeting of everybody that I just mentioned in the common room, and it was filled to capacity. And then the principal, I thought he was going to make this presentation about what they were going to do, and instead he introduced me and told them that I was going to tell them what we were going to do. So I was fine with that. So the first thing I did, and this is something I've always felt ever since my children started in the city schools, was that this is not a bad school district. There's problems in the fact of not understanding issues that students had. I mean, just a lot of things like that. But in terms of the fact that there were students that were being successful in the city school district. They were graduating. They were going on to get advanced degrees. So it wasn't that nobody was being successful, but unfortunately, the majority turns out weren't being successful, so, but the fact that some were being successful, that meant that there's other issues involved other than just instruction. So that's basically the philosophy I took when I went over there, and that, so the first thing I did was tell the teachers that I believed in them as educators and that they believed that they got into the education profession because they wanted to see children succeed. That was my assumption. Now, there may be people who weren't, they weren't doing that anymore, but I just took that assumption to say, you're professionals, you're good at what you do, you want to be successful, you didn't come here to fail. So what I was going to do was to help them regain their sense of pride in their profession and to be successful. I got a standing ovation. I mean, they were ready to carry me out of the room on their shoulders. So then I told them what we're going to do. Here's the straw proposal. This is the school improvement plan. You each look at it, divide yourselves up into committees. And basically, the school at that time they had a lot of special ed. It was pre-K through 6. However, pre-K was a separate program, separate administrators, separate principals, separate parent group. They totally were keeping themselves separate from the rest of the school. Their fear at this time was that they were going to have to become part of 33 school because 33 school was such a mess, and they didn't feel that they were a mess at all. In fact, they were considered to be a very good program. So you got this excellent program going on in the building in the same, they had a corner of the first floor, and then the rest of the students were in the remainder of the first floor and then the second and third floor. So, and in terms of instruction, in terms of what I saw very quickly is that there was no longer an organization structure that supported education. They had just been putting classrooms here and there, and in terms of teachers being able to collaborate, work together, there was no design for that at all. So that was my charge to them, was to create a plan that focused on nothing but the best educational model they could possibly imagine for that school. That meant what teachers should be clustered together, where should their classrooms be so that they can partner with each other, what student groups should be together. And I wasn't making that decision, that was up to them. And I said, but you've been through all kinds of in-services, you've got your degrees, some of them had graduate degrees. I said, you should know education, and what you don't know, do the research, find out, and bring it to the table. I said, all the other issues, all the other community issues, all the other family issues, all the other health issues, we're not putting it on them anymore. They're going to be just educators, and they're going to focus on that. They're going to focus on the students being successful. And that's the design that they were going to create. And one of the things I was looking for is I always look for something that can be done fairly quickly that would show a change, that would be a positive change, that people could believe in, and that would give them a sense of hope. Hey, look at this, we've accomplished this. Because I only had a few weeks. School's closing in June for the year. Well, I didn't know that actually it was slated to close for good. So I got them started on that process, and I went around and sat in on the different groups and just kind of facilitated the process, answer questions that they had in terms of how they might proceed, if there were any questions they had, where could they get resources and things like that. So that's, I just floated around to that, and then when they had the meeting of the whole, when they were beginning to stitch this thing together, then I would attend those meetings and help them through that process. So within 3 weeks, they created a school improvement plan, and including the administrator from the pre-K program, and I had met with her and the parents from that program early on, because I knew that they were really concerned. I mean, they were beyond concerned. They were afraid that their whole program was going to be destroyed by whatever happened. So I got Hilda involved as being one of the people to craft the plan, because most likely they were gonna have to be included, so she needed to be there to make sure that it was gonna meet their needs. And also, she had a lot of skills, and she was doing a very good job in the pre-K program, and I felt that those skills would really help 33 school. So we put together this plan. The school community agreed this is what we should do, and basically what it was is, to start with, was to move 24 classrooms, completely reorganize the school, and around a very solid education plan for all the students. Where should these kids be? What teachers should be working together? In terms of those other services that the students would need in terms of health issues, family issues, psychological, social issues, and things, I worked with some people in the community, including Dr. David Broadbent from Genesee Hospital, when it was open at the time, to create a partnership, to put together partnerships to provide those other services for the students. With the plan being that as that was put in place, and it was done at the same time that they reorganized the school, they identified a process so that there would be an access point. So not 6 or 7 people accessing several different agencies. All those agencies would access at one point, so that if a teacher has a student or students that had needed other services beyond what they're providing in terms of instruction and interaction in the classroom, that they had a person they could have this student work with to be assigned to all these other services that were put in place. And part of it was they put in a full-service health center, and it's still in place now. They got 2 full-time and 1 part-time nurse practitioners there. They had hoped to put in a dental dispensary, but they never, the space is there, but they never got the funds to finish it. And it's funny because it turns out that Ralph Spezia was doing the same thing at 17 school, and we didn't know what the other one was doing, but they were pretty much very similar models. So anyway, we put those in place so that the teachers could teach. That's what I told them we were gonna do. We're gonna give them an opportunity to just, because that's what they want, that's what they got in the profession to do. See kids become successful, to teach them and to see them move on to the next grade level. And so that's what their focus was. That was their responsibility, and then all the other things were put in place by the administrators, myself, the people from the community. So that's the structure that was built. And then I found out that part of what they didn't tell me was that the principal had resigned before I went over there, and he was going to be reassigned to central office. And so they were going to have to select a new principal, which was just another challenge in the process. So as happens a lot of times, they had somebody in mind, but they didn't. What I was concerned about and what I challenged them on is that they needed a person that had the skills and the experience to handle that school during this change, because it was a significant change. You've got a lot of teachers that were out of their comfort zone. Some of them were saying, I'm not leaving my classroom. I've been in this classroom for 24 years, or whatever it was. And so they had to be shown how this was going to be a benefit to them and their students. So we had to get out of the one teacher, one classroom where the students were, they didn't really interact with anybody else, to team teaching, where the skills of several teachers working together with the same students and clustered in a way that they had easy access to each other. They wanted to combine their classroom for some reason. They didn't have to go to the other side of the building or up to the 3rd floor to do it. So they started that process. Fortunately, the principal that they assigned to the school turned them down because he was not selected because he had the skills for what was going on there. But Hilda did. She was the one from the pre-K program. So I got the district to open up the process for interviews, and then they opened it up so she could interview. And I knew that hands down there wasn't going to be anything else that would have the knowledge of what was going on there and the experience and skill level that she did at that time. And her requirement was, she asked that I stay on at least through that school year, again, to continue the facilitation process. And then I went into the individual and team coaching part of what I do. So basically, just as they had issues come up which way should we go, then I would get them to develop their skills around making their decisions and being more successful. So when the school opened that fall, the feedback that came from the community and the parents and the teachers was it was the best school opening in the history of that school. So now we had people believe, and I always have believed in the district, so I knew that if people were given the opportunity to create the right environment based on sound educational practice and community engagement.
So from the time that you started working with that school, that was around May or something of the,
It was about the middle of May, and school ended at the same time it does now, in the middle of June or so. And then as soon as the school closed for the year, then they brought in, I guess they were district people, but with trucks and people to move all of the classrooms around them, and they were moving. And that was a thing that everybody said, wow, look at, we're creating this new school, we're creating this new environment, we're doing it around sound educational models. We're not just taking it out of the sky someplace. This has been proven that this kind of structure works. We believe in it. Some of us have had experience in those environments, so they were able to create that school themselves. And they actually saw the classrooms being moved into the configurations that they had planned themselves. So they had bought into it, that they owned it, and they were going to make it work.
now who was observing this? Just the teaching staff, or were people from the community also involved in observing what was going on?
They were, because like I said, when they opened the school in the fall, all of those constituencies said this is the best opening this school's ever had. The school was painted and clean and again, organized around sound educational practices and an education model. So, and that was determined by the educators. Nobody else came from outside of that school during this process. Some of the teachers may have changed. I don't know. One administrator, I think, might have changed other than the principal. But they didn't, there wasn't some team of consultants coming in. I was the person, and I was the one source that they had.
How'd they finagle opening it again after they were supposed to be closing?
Well, I guess I skipped that part. Once we had the plan done in 3 weeks, we were called to the district office, which I expected. I thought, well, okay, we have to present to Manny, and I can't remember who the deputy superintendent of elementary education was at the time, but we had to go and meet with them, and Hilda and the principal came along to, it's their plan. I'm just there to facilitate the process. So they brought the plan. We came into this office where they were going to have this meeting, and I think there were 3 or 4 other people in that room. I didn't know who they were. And they neglected to introduce them to us. Yeah, well, that's what it ended up being. It was a state field service team from the Board of Education, or from the New York State Board of Regents. But I didn't know that till after the meeting. So in that meeting, Hilda presented the plan. And so she had that school improvement plan. She talked about what we'd done, how the process had worked, how we had engaged the entire community in the process. And then she gave out copies of the plan to everybody, including these people that I didn't know who they were. And Manny looked at it, and the deputy superintendent looked at it and said, wow, this is amazing, this is fantastic. I'll provide the resources you need to move these classrooms, and you know, you've given sound argument for why this structure is gonna work and how it's based on sound educational practices and pedagogy and curriculum and everything else, and he was all excited about it and everything, and so then they asked a couple questions. The other people asked a couple questions, but, and then pretty much the meeting was over, and I still didn't know at that point, when that meeting was over, I still didn't know that that school had been slated to close. When we walked out of the room, these folks that were in the room that I didn't know followed me out of the room and cornered me and said, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm gonna ask you, who are you?" And they said, "Well, we're the field service team from the State Board of Regents." And that we had slated the school to close. And this is their exact quote: "We didn't think that there was a chance in hell that Manny could come up with a plan to save this school, and you did."
There you go.
And what happened?
What happened? The school is first of all, that school is the largest elementary school in the district. It's got over 1,000 students in it. It did at that time, and it still does today. The performance, if you look at the numbers in reading and math and the ones that are tracked, it's in the top third of the district. In some cases, it's in the top third of the top third. They changed principals about a year or two after I was involved, and Larry Ellison came in, and he's been the principal ever since then, and he's pretty much continued the programs that were in place at that time, upgrading them and updating them as more research was done in terms of practice that would make it even better than it was. Northeast area neighborhood development office is involved. That's the neighborhood group, and they're very active with the school, and they've got a PTA there, an active PTA, and in fact, they had a meeting for New York State was the Children's Defense Fund, which is a national organization, and they had a local, there's a state organization that's affiliated with them in some way. They had a meeting at 33 School a few weeks ago, and I had not been back to the school until this year. Once that year was done, I followed them in the newspaper and seeing the articles being written about them and about the fact that they were one of the most improved elementary schools in the state of New York. And I mean, this went on, and they've continued to operate at that level ever since then. And Larry's continued that. And then they went through a renovation. You may know better the year that this was fairly recently, that a couple of years ago, they were taken out for at least 1 year and moved the building to another facility, and then coming back a couple of years later into this renovated building. And they continued, even though they had moved out. And it was amazing. I talked to the parents this year and asked them about what was it like. Well, this move, it was, it was difficult, the fact that the students had to go to this other building. It was the fact that it's not in the neighborhood anymore, but that the focus on the students and their performance and the support that they needed and everything continued through that whole time. They came back into the building and they just continued to do what they did. And when I was there for that meeting just recently, a teacher came up that I didn't know, and she was actually talking to George Moses from the NEED organization. I think he's the president of NEED. Because she wanted to brag about this program, and I think it was, I'm trying to remember what it was a math program or something like that. It was a statewide competition for elementary schools. And they had a certain standard that they had to meet. They had all this rigorous expectations and everything. that class in number 33 school is number 1 in the state.
Yeah, I think she came over and
Yeah,
talked to
there
you
you go.
that
Yeah, right,
day
that's right,
after the
yeah.
meeting, yeah.
That's right, I got a witness. Yes, that's right, John was there, and he was there when she came over to brag about that, her success. So they continue to be very successful. I mean, there's still things that have to be addressed, but they're definitely on track. So, yes.
2 questions. You mentioned something about an administrative something before, when you got there initially, that they felt that they were doing fine.
No.
That they were in a corner of the building or
Oh,
something?
no, that was a pre-K program.
Oh.
Pre-K.
And they were doing fine.
Yep, they were separate from the rest of the school.
I see.
They had their own principal, basically their own parent organization, and they pretty much locked themselves away from the rest of the school.
And so you brought them in?
Well, it was pretty much a fait accompli. It was gonna happen. They were gonna become part of the school. I mean, it wasn't their choice. The district was saying, if we redo this school, if we keep this school, you're gonna have to become part of the school.
Okay.
So with that understanding, it was easier for me to get Hilda on board to become part of the planning, because she was gonna have to live with whatever came out of it. And I felt she was so skilled and had such a good experience related to what they were doing over there, that she would be a key asset for them, so.
And what were these sound educational principles that you've been referring to?
Yeah, well, I wasn't the educator. I relied on them to know what those things were, but
I see.
it related to pedagogy, it had to do with curriculum, it had to do with sound instructional practices like team teaching, having,
Okay.
instead of being one classroom
Right,
with
you
their
mentioned
students in there and
that,
one
yeah.
teacher
Okay.
all day long, now they interacted with other teachers, and so in order for that structure to be organized correctly, they had to be in a proximity so they can interact with each other. The way that it was before, it was
Right.
impossible,
Right.
because you'd have a first grade class on this floor, and then up 2 flights on the other floor is another first grade class, and if they had planned on teaming those teachers, how could they do it?
Yeah.
They'd have to be going all over the school. So, sorry, I didn't give it more detail.
Okay, thank you. No,
With the situation like we have with School 16, which is over at Freddie Thomas right now, and heaven knows when they're going to get back, as we find out here, we certainly would want to make sure that when it gets back here, that gets off to a good start, but what can we do while it's there is one of the questions that.
Well, you have the community involved. Do you review the school improvement plans from schools and the?
We haven't yet, no,
They call it something else now. What do they call it? It's not the school, it's still a school improvement plan, but somebody said they changed the terminology. But it's still the same thing. It's a school improvement plan. And there's
Comprehensive education plan,
yeah, something like
same
that.
thing, same.
Mhm.
So, and they're all divided up the same way in terms of what has to be addressed.
Mhm.
Now, each school can decide how they're addressing those things and at what point they are in that process in terms of if it's, I'm trying to think, some of it has to do with staff development, some of it has to do with curriculum development, some of it has to do with raising the performance in a particular area. Whatever it is, they determine what's their approach. What are they going to do about that? Are they going to do in-service training for the teachers? Are they going to do some kind of a structural reorganization to create team teaching or something? Whatever they decide. And again, they should always be looking at best practice. In terms of what that is, educators have access to information from all over the country. And they can look at research from all over the country to say, who's doing the best job in teaching math to 3rd graders? whatever it is. They can find that information, it's readily available, and then they can access that. They can, at that time, at least, I don't know what budgets being what they are, but at least some people could travel to those locations, go to conferences, bring back that information, then teach other people. And like I said, I'm connected to the Teacher Center here. I've worked with Susan Goodwin and Gaia Shakes, and I'm trying to remember the other woman's name, but they're doing in-service all the time in different focus areas that the district and the teachers feel are important, whatever they decide it is. And so ongoing, that training, that education, that training can continue on. So look at the school improvement plan, and it's based on current assessments. You know, so it could be, I mean, the assessments come out every year and it says the school's performing at this level in this area and this level in another area. And then they take that and they apply it to their school improvement plan. And each year then, they go back and they review it and they say, okay, last year we said we're going to improve our reading scores by so many points. And so how did we do? Did we achieve that? And if they had, whether they achieved it or not, then they need to look at it and say, why did we get the outcome that we got? Was it because we did great training and that's why things improved? Or is there some other reason that we didn't anticipate that caused us to improve? Or why did we fall backwards when we did all these things that should have worked and now we didn't? So that's part of the evaluation. Every year they go over that school improvement plan and then they write another one. They update it. They say, okay, we're making progress here, so we need to continue that, whatever program we used last year.
How much of an issue did you have with getting people to work with you on this? How much pushback did you get from the administration at 33?
Well,
They didn't have much option.
They were
or-
in a bad place,
Yeah.
so anything was good. And again, my approach is always to celebrate them as professionals.
Mhm.
And just by doing that, they know I'm on their side. I'm not there to beat them up. I'm not there to punish them in any way. I'm not going to bring other people in to replace them unless they prove that they're not up to the task. And we're going to give them an opportunity to be up to the task. We weren't just going to pull these, it wasn't an automatic thing. You're out of here because the school hasn't been doing well. Well, let's see. Let's give you a chance because now we see what these issues were. And it wasn't because you wanted to fail. It wasn't because you're not good teachers. We were asking you to do things but never taught you how to do those things. Like, how do you write a school improvement plan? How do you change your environment? See, none of them had any training in change management. So when you're trying to do change management, that involves all of your constituents. It's not just teachers and administrators, but that means you've got to communicate with community people, the parents, get them on board. What's their role going to be to make this happen? 'Cause again, my philosophy about education is it's a community activity. It's not just teachers, it's not just administrators, it's not just the parents, it's all of them plus the community. So they all have to be involved.
What interaction and, how did this play with the teachers' union? Because it seems like you must have had a lot of meetings at times that people normally wouldn't have been getting
I
together.
always carried a copy of the teacher's contract with me. I knew it front and back. I always read it. I knew more about it than most of the teachers did because not a lot of teachers read their contract. It's online if anybody wants to. You just look at Rochester Teachers Union contract, and the whole contract is online. So anybody can access it. So you can go online tonight, and if you want to read 170-some pages of contract language. But the good thing about it is it tells you what they've agreed to and what their limitations are, and what they're not going to do. And so whenever we were in any kind of discussions about changing hours or responsibilities or anything like that, then we would just look it up in the contract and say, okay, what did you agree to? Is this going to fit in the contract? And where it didn't, we look and see, is there language here that allows flexibility, because there is. Some people, a lot of people don't know that. They think, oh, well, this is the contract, is a contract. They don't have any flexibility. They absolutely do, and they've agreed to that. And Adam was on my side. I mean, I did an awful lot in the district, and I'd never had pushback from the union leaders whatsoever, because they knew that I had that contract, and I was not gonna violate their contract. At the same time, I was gonna hold their membership accountable for that contract. If that's what they agreed to, they can't tell me they're not gonna do it. And so they respected me for that. They didn't, I wasn't just shooting from the hip or coming in and trying to tell them that they could or couldn't do things without the fact that
Now, the whole plan for the reorganization was done before the end of school?
yes, it was done within about 3 weeks.
Okay. And the work that was done over the summer was shifting the classrooms
Shifting the
around?
classrooms, and then and then the fact that now they were gonna do all this team teaching. They had reorganized how the faculty was gonna interact with each other, who they were working with, how it was written in their school improvement plan to execute that. So over the summer, that's what they did. They had, because there are hours for in-services and staff development, so we just fitted into how the contract would allow that to happen. And the teachers and administrators spent time in groups. They organized themselves around the other administrators, which they hadn't done before, and then created basically education teams. I think it was by grade level, so the first pre-K through third grade in one group and 4, 5, and 6 in the other group, or something like that. And then they would meet together, and then they would just determine how they were going to roll out the plan and be successful going into the coming year.
And those people met, this was before the end of the year, or did some of them
Well,
get together over the summer, or what?
They met over the summer, most of it, not very much at the beginning of the summer, because their hours had been used up, but there was time for in-service before school opened, and that's how the principal ultimately organized it. And from the time the plan was written until the end of the school year, they were finishing up with their classes the way that they were. They didn't start any reorganizing at that point, because it would have just caused more chaos. And once the school year was done, then they started the process of moving these classrooms, and the hours that the teachers had in terms of the close of school, and they have a few days when they're still expected to be there, they spent that time with their new classroom space. And they weren't able to complete all that they wanted to do with their classrooms because they didn't have enough time, but they knew that that's one of the things that was expected when they came back in the fall. Now they knew their space. They had to come up with a plan how we were gonna make this space work for what we're gonna accomplish. So it was all in place. It was orderly. I didn't have any fights. I mean, I had a few heated discussions at a couple of points, but
Okay. Well, it's very interesting. I hope we can implement some of that with School 16, and I haven't seen enough of what's going on at 10. It seems to be working pretty well from what I understand.
yeah, now one of the things I would encourage the community and the parents, and for all the schools in the district, is be familiar with the school improvement plan. Be familiar with the contracts, because you get into these discussions and you have people that are saying that the teachers aren't allowed to do this or aren't allowed to do that, and they're wrong. If they knew the contract, if they spent time, and it's not that onerous of a project to read the contract, it's fairly long and it's legal language, but you can get through it. It's broken into sections so that you can go from one to the other. But everybody should know that.
How many people from the neighborhood association there were involved with this whole process while it was going on?
Three or four. I know, and I can't remember who it was. I got a call from one person early on that wanted to inform me that they'd instituted a lawsuit against the city school district for what had happened because the school was such a disaster. And so that lawsuit was kind of going on while this started, but by the end of the summer, they'd taken it off the table. And when they saw the opening of school that year, they were on board. And then since then, and I think the Northeast Area Neighborhood Association was part of that at the time. Now, I don't think that George was the president at that time. In fact, I'm sure he wasn't. But
How many volunteers working in the classrooms were involved with the school at that time?
just whatever parents and community people that were there when I started. I mean, there's some more people got involved, but it wasn't a huge influx of all these people. Part of that was due to the fact that whenever, because I teach courses in care and feeding of volunteers, and a lot of people do it so poorly that they shouldn't even bother doing it because it hurts them and it hurts the volunteers. But you've got to have a clear understanding of what do we want to accomplish, who should be doing this, what skill level do they need to have, should we teach them, should we have to teach them? So they have to be prepared to do what you're asking them to do. Now, some people come prepared because they've got a background in whatever you're asking them to do, but other people don't. So you have to decide what's it going to take to get them up to speed and make sure that you give them clear understanding of what's expected of them. You're coming in here and you're going to spend an hour and a half and you're going to do this, and when you're done, we'll know you're done because you're going to be able to look at this, whatever it is, and then thank them profusely for the time that they put in. Well, how can we help you? Do you know anybody else that would like to be involved? So if you do that well, if you take care of your volunteers well, you're going to have all the volunteers you'll ever need. But if you do it poorly, you may never get volunteers. So, and the results can be pretty poor.
Per classroom at any one time, what were we looking at?
That
Half
they
a
had.
volunteer or one volunteer or?
They also had paraprofessionals working in the lower grade levels that were staff. So they were there I think at part-time, three-quarter time. So they had staff, but in terms of parent involvement, then it was just dependent on grade levels and what parents were involved. And that's something that they worked on developing, was more parent involvement. And they have a strong PTA now, and I met with the PTA a couple times this year. I'm a member of their PTA, so I go to their meetings. One of the things with volunteers in classrooms, teachers get nervous about that because they want to know, what am I getting? This person, do I have to spend more time with a volunteer than I do? Significantly involved in that. You're going to have somebody come into my classroom, let's decide what do we want them to do? How is that going to help me? And how can I support them but at the same time be able to teach my class and take care of my students? So that's a whole different ballgame. But it's a great resource, but it's got to be done well. It can't be just, well, let's go out and recruit 16 volunteers, put them in 16 classrooms. Oh, hello, Miss Johnson, here's your volunteer. What do you want them to do?
Sure.
That all has to be planned. In fact, it should be part of the school improvement plan. It should be written in there as well.
Okay.
So,
Any other questions or thoughts or?
It's been my experience with my children at 16 school that in most cases the individual teachers would recruit from their classes parents or grandparents to come in, so that they had not only a say in what they were getting, but they also knew them in many cases. So it made for a nice, easy transition to the classroom. And I didn't see any teachers at 16 that were unwilling to do this.
Okay, anything else that, see, we're right at the witching hour here. We agreed we'd clear out the place by 7 o'clock, so I guess. As far as days, we had at least 6 people call and say they couldn't make it today, but they'd like to be part of this in the future. Is a different day better for some people, or?
You had the nice email about location that once the school year starts, it'd be nice to have some of these at some of the schools.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for, because it would be real nice to get a tour of the school and hopefully get more teachers and staff involved so we get to know them.
I just happened, I was on Facebook and I noticed that this organization was there, and I clicked on it and saw the meeting, so I hurried and came down.
Oh, great.
So before that, prior to that, I didn't, although I think Cam Musgraver must have told me once that.
I thought you were here one time before.
I may have done, I don't know. I've been at the board meetings a lot.
Yeah, this is the location 19 right up. If you haven't joined, you can join that.
When's the board election? November, right? Okay, normal election day, November.
Regular political election, yep.
Don't forget the primaries, or those people who aren't satisfied with the slate that the party puts up. I don't think any Republicans are gonna run it, do you?
Are there any left?
I remember
Where's the city?
Republicans
Yes.
running this time.
Your schools now. But I want to hand out some stuff here to everybody. There is a meeting on July 8th, next Monday, at the Faith Temple in Elmwood Avenue in Brighton.
Right.
And it's really kind of a frightening thing when you, if you get into this. I don't know how many of you have been aware of this or made aware, but it's really an attack on education as far as I'm concerned. And even with all of the work that Robin has done with different schools, if this comes in, the teachers are going to have far less control over what they do in the classroom.
Where does this come from? I mean, I don't mean you, but.
Well, it is really, because this came actually from the federal government, and they like to say it came from the state, but it didn't really. It
All
was
the
part.
states are gonna be held to do the same.
Well, in the beginning, 45 states agreed to this, and the reason they agreed, because they got money from Race to the Top.
Uh-oh.
But in order to get that money, they had to agree to institute Common Core in the schools. So it's something that I really feel strongly about, that will not be good for our schools. Did everyone get one of these?
Yep.
It's not going to be good because,
That's what I feel, because it's going to change the way education is directed to the schools. They're developing curriculum. In some cases, it wasn't developed even before they signed these
They wrote it out.
the teachers up, or the school districts up for it. And there's going to be less local control over education. And again, I invite you to read in some of these. In some of these websites, you're going to find stuff that has the pro arguments and the con. And I don't want to take all your time with this, but there's a bunch of us who have been meeting, and we planned this meeting for the next Monday.
Well, I'm gonna give you a recommendation too, in terms of doing your research. Check and see what Kentucky is leading in terms, Kentucky, the state of Kentucky. They've already started implementing this, and how they're gonna implement this. I just came back from the National PTA convention in Cincinnati. There's educators there from Kentucky, and they showed the the Common Core and how they were approaching it. And the teachers felt that they had actually more flexibility because they have to teach to accomplish the core, and how they do that is, in terms of curriculum, things like that, is open to what's working. That's what they have to, this has to happen, and look at what the core really is. I didn't see all of it, I just saw some of it. They had some examples, and none of it looked scary to me. And they're already using it, and so, but that's a place that you can go to, and the parents are involved, and the community is involved. And this was at the National PTA Convention, and so there were parents and teachers and administrators from Kentucky that were there answering questions, presenting, so that people could ask questions about what this is all about, and they can explain what their experience has been so far, that they're using it, how they're using it, so in terms of the Common Core. So
Well, is Kentucky an advanced state? I mean, I didn't think so. I'm
some
sort of-
people don't
And,
think
and with all due respect, the National PTA is not necessarily representing, it definitely is not speaking for me as a parent, and it's not necessarily, it's definitely not representative of the vast majority of city school parents and urban parents in general. The National PTA has been actually taken a position and has got funding from the Gates Foundation and from others who have funded the advent of the Common Core. So you have to really follow the money when you're looking at these questions. And it's interesting because there are people from like the extreme right, sort of like like an extreme libertarian perspective that are anti-government, scared of the government, think that the government is evil under all circumstances, who are critical of this. And I couldn't be, farther from that political position myself. I'm from a much more left socialist type position. And we also, from that perspective, you have concerns. And what I think brings us all together in terms of people who are articulating concerns with Common Core is a concern about local control, about corporate influence from a very not only national perspective but international, multinational corporate, domination.
Well, I decided I
concern.
wasn't gonna do anything
So-
until I got more information.
Right,
so
so it's really look at it, and it's not Kentucky. I mean, New York is fully into it. We are
Yeah.
fully implementing it.
However, there is a
It's just
bill now
that
in
there
the
wasn't,
Assembly
we didn't have the proper teacher training to begin
Mhm.
implementing it this year, but it was implemented anyway. And there are concerns about local control, but there's also room for some local control.
15%, I think, yeah.
You might be mixing things up. When you're talking
Maybe.
15%, you're talking about like testing
In the
percentages.
curriculum
or-
itself, the curriculum is, I don't want to say set in stone, but it's pretty rigid. And there's and there is very little
Financial pressure we're under and the drive for efficiency, which coincidentally, not coincidentally, is part of the same rhetoric we get from Gates and,
Yeah.
from the